Hi everyone, and welcome to a new season of Tales from a Very Minor Celebrity. Yes, I'm back, and this time I'll be delving into my celebrity archive and looking back at some of my favourite interviews from my career in radio and TV. Now, to be included as a favourite, they can either be because the person is really nice, it was a particularly funny interview, or just very interesting, or even controversial for some reason or another. And I hope you'll like them as much as I did recording them. For this first one, you'll hear a chat I had with everyone's favourite globetrotter, Michael Palin. And I think you'll agree that he slots very nicely into the everyone likes category. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say a bad thing about him. I spoke to him back in 2004 about his latest series, Himalaya, which recorded his 6-month trip around the famous mountain range. The trip covered 4,800 kilometres, that's around 3,000 miles, but it involved a lot of vertical travelling, including several treks into the mountains. The highest point reached by Palin was Everest Base Camp at 5,300 metres, that's around 17,500 feet. He admitted that although he'd done fairly arduous journeys before, Himalaya had its own particular difficulties.
Most of the journeys I've done have had a real element of a physical challenge to them, pole to pole, I suppose, full circle around the Pacific, which was just such a long journey, 10 months of the year.
Yeah.
But this one had particular problems. I think really that almost all of it was going to be fairly inhospitable. You're going to be working at altitude a lot of the time. And, the Sahara was flat, but it was warm. The Himalayas are rugged and high, but also the air is much thinner as you go up there. So just movement is more difficult. You get headaches, you don't sleep as well, your appetite goes. And if you're doing something as physically involving as filming all the time, it does take a toll on myself and on the crew. In fact, one of our crew members, our wonderful sound recordist, John Pritchard, got pulmonary edema, which is for water on the lung, and on the Everest section, had to go to hospital in Tibet and be flown back home. So, we're all aware that this was actually a tough one, and it got tougher as we went on.
You weren't very well either, were you?
No, I had a particularly nasty experience on the Annapurna Trail, which is it's quite a well recognised trek, and it's not that dangerous, but it's steep, and you go from about 7,000 to nearly 14,000 feet. And on about the second day of a 4 or 5 day trek, I got this really bad cold and cough and awful sore throat. It was like having sort of knives stuck down my throat. It was just so unpleasant. And yet we had to keep going up. And so there's actually less oxygen. Your lungs were getting more compressed as you went up. So, it was rather like being ill and being hit on the head with a brick at the same time. It's all recorded on camera, rather sadly, because I see me try to do pieces to camera and explain the beauty of the mountains and just ending up with an almost terminal cough. And that was a very low point, and it's about the sickest I've got on any of the journeys. And at one time I really thought, the time has come for me to say, no, I'm too old for this. I shouldn't be doing it. But the sun came out, the mountains looked wonderful, and I carried on.
Fantastic. Bull racing, I think, is also featured in the first programme.
Yes, quite a sporty first programme. It's Pakistan. I mean, they're terribly interested in sport in Pakistan of all kinds. I mean, they play cricket anywhere. We even found some boys playing cricket at about sort of 12,000 feet, halfway up a mountain, with fielders all over the place, and the ball would go down about 12,000 feet, and someone would take a catch. Yeah, brilliant. But then there are some sports which they make up themselves, and one was this bull racing in Pakistan, where it's sort of a festival at the end of the harvest. They yoke these two bulls together, and they put a sort of reins on them, and the reins are attached to a small metal disc, sort of about the size of a tea tray. And a man leaps onto this disc, and off go the bulls, and it's a 600-yard course, and he has to try and stay on this tray, bouncing, surfing across the fields.
And also street dentists, which could solve a few problems over here.
Yes, it's just a different kind of way of approaching dentistry. The streets of Peshawar, which is the big city on the northwest frontier. And we came across this street which was just full of dentists, all advertised with these great big sort of gleaming white teeth painted above the shop. And so I went into one, and I've had quite a few things done to my mouth over the years. And yeah, my mouth is a wonderland of bridges and gaps, and it's like Disneyland in there. So we just thought we'd get the local man to see, just check it out. And, normally you expect someone at least to sort of put a glove on or whatever, but he just opened my mouth, stuck 2 fingers like tree trunks in there and pulled away. And I thought, my God, only second day into the series, I'm going to lose my teeth. So I sort of, I deferred from having any further treatment. But he said that I wasn't cleaning properly, and shouldn't use toothpaste. I should use a stick and my fingers.
You do get stuck in, you do have a go, and you're not afraid of trying foods, the traditional foods of some of these countries. Did you come across anything that was slightly unusual?
Well, I mean, anything to do with yak in my book is unusual. And saw a yak buttock, little sort of snack at lunchtime. It was a bit odd, but it depends how it's cooked, and they look after it very well. And what they do love above all is butter tea, and that's very salty tea with a lump of butter in it, and it's just everything that sort of revolts one's tastes, really, and only because we're not familiar with it.
Yeah.
And it took me an awful long time to get used to that. And everywhere we went, Michael, now you go and sit there and talk to the yak herder about it. The first thing they do is brew up a nice little huge pot of yak butter tea. More butter in your tea, and I'd have to drink this because you have to.
And have you ever been offered a trip that you refused?
Yes. I was offered after. I think it was after Pole to Pole. I was asked if I wanted to go be blasted off into space and do a program from space. And it was quite serious. It was after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They had a lot of old spacecraft, Vostok spacecraft. And there was some company, kind of Wizzo tours, thought they'd get one. And I would be the first person to go up there. And people would look and they say, if Michael Palin's done it, I want to go there too. And for some reason, it took me about 1.5 nanoseconds to say no. But now Richard Branson's doing it for real.
Well, exactly, yes.
So maybe I missed the opportunity.
The wonderful Michael Palin. Incidentally, if you haven't already checked out his latest travel series, Michael Palin in Iraq, which was aired in the UK on 5, you'll be able to catch up with it via the My5 app. And I can highly recommend it. It's a fascinating look around one of the most dangerous countries in the world, an epic 1,000-mile odyssey following the course of the mighty Tigris River from its source in eastern Turkey through Iraq to the Persian Gulf. Now, next week you'll hear an interview I did with Ruby Wax. She was actually on to promote the joys of duty-free shopping at airports, but it was still a very enjoyable chat, especially when she started talking about some of her favourite interviews.
She was so crazy that she wanted to get me to her where she kept her horses, but Zhaj had no sense of direction, so the journey lasted 4 days. And sadly, her driver was on some kind of, let's say, illegal substance, had less idea where we were going. And eventually, Zhaj and I ended up somewhere in Alabama, I think, and with people, who were kind of half...
I think we know
what I mean. And so we ended up lost, and eventually there was a traffic accident, and a cop stuck his head in and said, "I'm sorry, there's been an incident." And she said, "Darling, what's he driving? A Chevrolet?" And thinking it was her husband, right? And so he said, "No." And she went, "Thank you, darling," and pushed the button, and the window went up into the cop's head and pretty much took his nose off.
That's Ruby Wax next week on more Tales from a Very Minor Celebrity.